How's everybody doing? Yeah, okay. Well, listen, you need to know, in case you don't know, we started Epic Church so that you could find Jesus, that you could build your entire life around him, that you would be able to connect deeply with others in what we call a Christian community, and also that you would be able to use your gifts to make a difference in our church and outside of these walls as well. And we also want to make sure that there's forever a place for every single person who wants to step into the Epic Church community. We want that, don't we? And guys, lately we've been running out of places. How are we doing back there in the makeshift seating? Okay, all right. Listen, we've been running out of places, especially at this 11 o'clock gathering. Over the last month, we have been between 90 to 100% capacity at 11 a.m. If you like people, give a shout. If you don't, you should come to a different service. And last week was literally 100% capacity. Just so you know, last week as well as this week until they moved in those seats, we have 310 seats in the room, and last week we had 310 humans in the room at 11 o'clock. And that is awesome. And if it's about ego, you need to know your boy loves preaching to an absolute packed house, but it's not a great experience when you can't come in and get a seat. I mean, I even had staff members last week who were like giving up their seat and sitting on the floor thinking I would give them a raise, but I'm not giving them a raise. That's just what we call ministry. So to make sure there's a place for all of your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, mine, people who are already in the city and going to discover Jesus soon, and people who aren't here yet but are on their way, we're going to, on October 15th, go to 3 Sunday gatherings. It's amazing. Everybody cheering doesn't have to preach 3 times starting October 15th, but whatever. No, I'm jazzed. I'm here for it. So we'll go to 9 o'clock a.m., 10:30 a.m., 12 o'clock noon. This is pro tip without judgment. If you tend to get to the 11 o'clock at 11:23, noon is your jam. I do want to ask you, come to whatever service works for you. We'll do all the things there'll be identical services. All of us, including myself, who are parents of 6th to 12th grade students, our students will be meeting what they're doing right now at 11. They will be doing at 12 starting October 15th. And here's what I want to ask every person watching online, but it's normally here, or you've been watching and you're going to be here soon. We now have room for you. You don't have to stay home anymore. We're going to create room. We're going to free up 300 seats in this room and about 80 to 100 spots outside of this room. Last week, by the way, we had 310 in the room, another 119 outside the room. Kids, students, volunteers, just gotten kind of crazy. But we're here for it. We're excited. We had 28 first-time guests last week. You're like, is that common? That's not. That's typically like an Easter Sunday, first-time guests. People can RSVP on our website. Let us know you're coming. I know many of you did that. Over 10 did that today. That's super rare, at least. And so I've told our staff team this week, typically we see these things coming for months at a time, and so we can have a lot of dialogue about it. But this is one of those, we're just looking literally at the data points and knowing that we want to have a great experience for anybody that steps in. We needed to make this decision soon. And so I want to ask you, would you be willing to show up at the 12 o'clock gathering if it can work for you? In whatever gathering you show up for, would you be willing to serve? If you're not on a team, please join a team. This is the only way we can step into the moment we think God is presenting us in the season. If you've signed up for a team, but you've not actually activated that, come on, let's do the conversion thing. Let's get from sign up to show up. And if you've been out for a season, we're going to continue to serve everyone who shows up here. But the more people we have serving, the more we can maximize this opportunity God's presented to us. Do you agree? Yeah. And we want to make sure that your friends have a place to sit when they come in, especially starting October 15th. So just hold tight. 3 weeks from today, we will kick off with 3 gatherings, and let's go for it. So today, I told our team, we got to treat today like it's nothing. We're only doing 2 today. Like you don't have to get extra sleep, guys. We're going to get into that. It started for me when I was only 5 years old. My kindergarten teacher's name was Mrs. Salmon, and she was wonderful. Everything was great that year. Almost everything was great that kindergarten year. There was this one thing that wasn't so great, and we had to do it every single day. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mandatory nap time. I do not understand why we have to pause the fun we're having in the middle of the day to lie down on a mat that's at least as comfortable as what we'll have at Focus. And to be honest, I didn't even know how to fall asleep in the middle of the day. So I would just lie there. Finally, the time would end and we could get back to the good stuff. Now in my 40s, I'm like, man, that daily nap would be That's not even true. That's not even true. Also, growing up, I didn't watch many movies. And those of you who know me well know that that's still kind of true today. But I didn't watch many movies, not because I went to a church that boycotted Hollywood. Anybody go to a church that boycotted Hollywood? Everybody grow up in that space? The reason I didn't watch many movies growing up is because I could not sit still. And not much has changed in the last 40 years. I learned this message I'm giving you today on Friday, like I always learn my Sunday messages on Friday mornings, with a 6 to 7 mile walk is where I get all this into me. I don't sit down to do this. After this gathering, I'm going to greet a bunch of you. I'm going to walk away from here physically exhausted, but I probably won't take a nap today. I probably will go for a long walk or a run with my daughter. When Shauna and I travel to wonderful beach destinations, it takes all of the discipline I can muster up just to sit on the beach. Anybody with me? And after what feels like it's been 2 hours, I say to her, Shauna, would you like to go for a walk now? We've been sitting a while. And she's like, Ben, it's only been 20 minutes. I met with an executive coach the last couple of days of July, and the day before I met with him, he said, hey, just text some people that know you well and ask them this question. It's not an awkward question at all, so just ask it to a first date this week. Ask it to your boss. Hey, what do you think are my gifts, strengths, and superpowers? Not awkward at all. Not vulnerable. And I'm like, hey, my executive coach gave me this assignment. So I called my wife to think, just to see what she might say are my gifts, strengths, and superpowers. My kids happen to be in the car at the same time, and so she says, guys, what are Dad's gifts, strengths, and superpowers? And here's what they say, verbatim, no lie. He gets a lot of stuff done and doesn't waste time. Gifts? Superpowers? Guys, I like doing stuff. I don't see the point of rest. I don't see the point of stopping. I've been given a grand mission. For a guy in middle age, I've got a whole lot of energy. But every now and then I come against a wall that reminds me why, if I care about what God's called me to do on this earth, I better care about the rest He's called me to take on this earth. Let me tell you about the first 2 weeks of August so you know what it was like for me, and I'm just curious if you can relate to what I'm about to tell you. First 2 weeks of August were amazing. God was on the move here, just like He's still doing. Cool things were happening. I spent that whole first week of August planning my entire teaching series for 2024. You know what it's like to feel accomplished? Boom! All of 24, we're coming for you. And on Monday of that week, I received the first iteration of the cover design for my book, and that set off some dopamine as well. And on Friday of that week, I got to meet with someone that I had always been wanting to meet with. And from there, I hopped in the car and drove to a friend's house who was hosting this incredible event for every person in San Francisco who's leading Alpha this fall. And it was supernatural. God showed up. It was incredible. Everyone leaves. Shauna and I stay around to help our host clean up. And in that moment, I received a text message from someone letting me know who was going to write the foreword for my book. And it was so exciting to me that I didn't sleep that night hardly at all. But who cares? It was awesome. The next week looked a lot the same. I'm having meetings with people I didn't know I could get meetings with. I'm getting responses from people. We're celebrating baptisms happening in our church. We're thinking about all the things that we're going to do as a church in the future. And I get to that Friday, August 11th, and I learned the message that morning. And after I learned the message, what's supposed to happen on a Friday is it's a half off day, and then Saturday's supposed to look the same. It's supposed to. That's what my calendar says. But once I got to noon that Friday, I didn't know who I was. Have you ever been in that moment where you just couldn't stop? And even if your body stopped, your mind didn't stop? Guys, I didn't know what to do. I got in the car and I thought, some ideas will come to my mind when I get in the car. And so I start driving. I get 2 exits down the 280 and realize I have nowhere to go. I don't even know what I'm doing. And for the next few days, I didn't feel like myself at all. Now, you've already heard this about me, but I said it in the context to know, so that you can know that it was another painful reminder. Ben, you are a human being. Ben, you cannot keep going. Ben, if you say you care about your assignments from God as much as you say, if you care about them as much as you say you do, then there's something else you better prioritize, or all that God has for you will in some way be forfeited, either what you do or how you do it or the implications from what you do. So here's what I need to do today. I need us to talk about something that I don't naturally like to think about, and I'm calling this message, What's the Point of Rest? What's the point of rest? Here's the question I want you to carry with you into the message today. Do you care enough about the rest that's needed to sustain the life you've been called to live? Do you care enough about the rest that's needed to undergird, if you think about like on the surface versus below the surface, do you care enough about the rest that's required to be able to do the thing God put you on this earth to do? If you were here last week, we talked about work. I did a message called Can Work Satisfy? And today's message completely stands on its own. But if you want to know holistically how do you handle and engage with work and rest rhythms, I would encourage you to go back, if you missed it, and watch or listen to last week's message, Can Work Satisfy? But for today, we're calling this message, What's the Point of Rest? I want to start in the beginning, which is always a good place to start. At the very end of Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. Would you stand with me? The very end of Genesis chapter 1, in verse 31, Genesis 1, 31 through 2, 3. But I want you not just to carry the message question for this teaching, I want you to take it into your week and just keep asking yourself, do I care enough about the rest that's needed to hold up the life that I say really matters to me? Verse 31 into chapter 2, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. What is the point of rest? You may be seated. First principle out of this text: if rest is possible for the God who is holding the whole world together, then it must be possible for us too. But Ben, if rest is possible for the God who's holding the whole world together, then it must be possible for you and me as well. Now, I'll be the first to admit that God isn't resting for the reasons we need to rest. So pay attention to this. He's not resting for the same reasons that you and I are required to rest. God isn't resting because he's tired. He doesn't get tired. We do. God isn't resting because he's in danger of running on fumes. We are in danger of running on fumes. God doesn't know what it's like to be so exhausted that he's burning out and leaving his job. We know well what it's like to be exhausted and on the verge of burnout, don't we? Some of you are like, no, Ben, I don't. Well, that's because you don't care enough about last week's message. You can rest too much. You can value rest too much. Some of you, literally, just a few of you, not many people in San Francisco, but just a few of you are acting like God said, hey, rest 6 days a week and work 1 day a week. And whatever, if that's your jam, if it works for you. If you got passive income, I guess that can happen. But why is God resting? 3 things I want to pull out. The first reason God's resting is because he wants to enjoy the good work that he's done. When's the last time you paused, celebrated, and just looked at, you know what? Wow, that was pretty amazing that we did that. Many of you know I coach a lot of church leaders, and when I coach church planters, people that are on the verge of starting a church like we did here at Epic, they will ask me, hey, do you have any regrets from that first span of time, that first season when you were getting the church off the ground? And it's not that I wouldn't do things differently, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about those kind of things. But I tell them there's one main regret I have from those days. And here it is. See if you can relate. One of the main, and probably the only main regret I have from those days is that I didn't stop often enough to celebrate the good work we had already done. Now, let me shoot straight with you. Part of my role as a visionary is that I am getting us on to what's next. That is needed. Would you agree? You need it at your company. You need it at your family. We need it here at our church. But while 90% of that may be positive, the negative for me is that it was always about what's next, and never did I take enough time to go, guys, look at what we just did. And what God's doing in part is just going I'm enjoying the work I just did. There's a satisfaction. It's not an ego trip. It's satisfaction in the work that he did. The second reason that God is resting is a way of just declaring that that's enough for now. Question to you, is God going to do any more work beyond these 6 days? Oh, yeah. He is. And because you are going to do work beyond every day and it's never all finished, you tell yourself, I can't rest till it's all done. But is it ever all done? I'll never forget, I had a mentor, he told me this. He said, Ben, when I realized that if I left the office at 7 o'clock or if I left at 4:30, I still had something on my to-do list. So I started leaving at 4:30. And God is resting to show you and I what's required to sustain the life that we've been called to live. Now, what can be considered a form of rest? Like, what are some obvious forms of rest? Not rhetorical, like, speak to me. Sleep. Yep, 4 of you are doing it right now, which is awesome. If we can get the camera on that person, at least embarrass them if they're not going to hear this sermon. Sleep, yeah, that is. Doing nothing, I guess. I don't know how to do that, but doing nothing might be a way to rest. Some of us escape with Netflix binge watching at night, and we tell ourselves we're resting when we're really losing rest. Maybe reading a book that's not related to our work, that's a form of rest, right? Anybody besides me struggle to get fiction? Okay, thank you. I just I don't, I've done a few fiction books in the last 20 years. Thank you, Hunger Games. But I'm trying. I've actually got a fiction book packed for my next trip. I'll tell you later whether I can read it or not. But whatever you think about as a form of rest, I think it can look different for all of us, and I'll talk about that before we bounce today. But if you don't know our mission and vision here at Epic Church, our vision is to orient our entire lives around Jesus. So whatever the topic is, we ask, what does it look like to orient that thing around Jesus? So today, we want to know, what does it look like to orient our rest around Jesus? What does that look like? And it's important, too, to distinguish between, there are lots of kinds of rest that you and I need. Do you agree? There are times that we need physical rest. There are times we need soul rest. There are times we need emotional rest. There are times, raise your hand, we just need rest from the people who drain us. Yeah, we're not going to tell them that they're on that list. We're just going to get rest from them intentionally. I want to show you a text in Mark 1 that I hope you carry with you, just like the question earlier. Mark 1, verses 32 through 39. I want you to see what Jesus does. Lots of activity at the front end of this text, lots of activity on the back end, but I want you to see what he does in the middle that may sound counterintuitive to some degree. Here's what Mark tells us. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus, listen, all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. So tons of ministry activity. Very early the next morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he did not come for rest, but he did get rest. So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. I love this text. I would encourage you to get very familiar with it and just ask, am I leaning, and you can put last week's message with that idea too, am I leaning into the activity God's called me to do, and am I undergirding that activity with the rest God's called me to take? Now, what seems counterintuitive in this particular text is this. We know Jesus is exhausted, but instead of sleeping in, he actually loses sleep. Listen to me. Because he realizes while physical rest is of value, what I need in this moment is soul rest and union with God. Now, for those of you that are like, throw me a bone on physical rest. Listen, there are times where Jesus is asleep, right? Even when a huge storm is coming, what is he doing? So does Jesus value physical rest? Yes, but he's teaching us a great principle in that story and in this one, and it's this. Really listen closely. Sometimes we think we need physical rest when we need soul rest. Sometimes we need physical rest. Sometimes we need a rest from other humans. Sometimes we need a rest from specific humans. Sometimes we need a rest from a particular kind of work, and other times we need rest from all of our work. And it's counterintuitive, but Jesus has to rise early and forego sleep to get the deep soul rest he needs. He's been doing so much ministry, he is depleted. He's on the verge of burnout. If he doesn't do what he does here, he needs his soul restored, renewed, and replenished. What are you doing to get yours? He knew he couldn't keep up that crazy, intense activity. I love this from John Eldridge, who's helped a lot and I'll tell you more about him before I go today. In his book called Get Your Life Back, listen to what he writes. What we assume is a normal lifestyle is absolute insanity to the God-given nature of our heart and soul. So let me tell you what we do. I do it and you do it. When we ask each other how we're doing, we say, we're busy. I got a little softer answer that still means the same, but it just makes me feel better. My life is full. It's just really full. Now you know my secret. It just sounds better in public. You're busy? My life's just full. Eldridge writes, what we assume as a normal lifestyle is absolute insanity to the God-given nature of our heart and soul. And this is what we do. We tell each other, but it's normal, Ben. My coworker does it, and my coworker does it, and everybody in our city does it, and everybody in 2023 does it. Do you want normal? Because with that normal lifestyle, guess what else has been normalized now? The highest anxiety and depression we've ever had in the history of the world. Guess what's an all-time high? We've normalized prescription and non-prescription drugs. Do you want normal? I love this invitation through the prophet Isaiah that God gives. Listen to what he says in Isaiah 30:15. And I think it's there's times where you read prophecy and you realize it's for one time and one place and one people, but this is one of those that I think God offers to all people at all times and all places, even in San Francisco. This is what the sovereign Lord, the Holy One of Israel says. In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength, but you would have none of it. You see, we're going, I'm just so exhausted, and God's like, I gave you away. And we're like, I'm burning out, and he's like, I offered you a path. And we're like, I can't stop. And he's like, I put the Sabbath into the universe's fabric. Is God saying to you today, or maybe to me, I gave you this opportunity for rest and strength and quiet, and you said to me, no. Let me tell you something that you probably have never correlated, so I want to correlate it for us. What we do with rest declares what we believe about God and what we believe about ourselves. You're like, no, Ben, what I do with my Bible time, what I do with my church attendance, my small group, my mission. Ben, I'm serving here. That declares what I believe about God and people. And yes, it does. And what you and I do with rest declares what we believe about God and what we believe about ourselves. From our friend Rich Velotis, who will be teaching us at Focus and so many of these things, he writes this. What would it look like to live at a different pace? What if there was a rhythm of life that could instead enable us to deeply connect with God, a lifestyle not dominated by hurry and exhaustion, but by margin and joy? As long as we remain enslaved to a culture of speed, superficiality, and distraction, we will not be the people God longs for us to be. And then this invitation from the 23rd Psalm, the first 3 verses, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. I want to use those 3 verses and show you 3 reasons why we don't prioritize rest. I would write these down and then be honest with yourself and a close friend about which one of these is you. Here's why we don't prioritize rest, just straight from the Psalm. Number 1, we believe that we are the main provider for our lives. And guess what? If I'm the main provider for my life, I can't take a day off, right? I mean, I can go on vacation, but I'll work the whole time. Why? I'm the main provider. If it's to be, it's up to me. I mean, this is the whole point. Number 2 reason, we carry around this nagging sense always that we don't have enough and that we have not done enough. The 3rd reason is kind of the opposite. We believe we're smart enough, strong enough, or energetic enough that we don't need the rest that all those other mere humans need. What keeps you from prioritizing rest? Main provider? Not enough syndrome? Or you believe you're superhuman? But Ben, I really care about my work. Me too. Here's the principle. If you really care about your work, you should really care about your rest. Like, even if that's the motive, that's okay. Even if that's the motive for you doing something different than you've been doing with this rhythm of resting, I'm okay with that. I think God's okay with that. Even Jesus said, if you abide in me, you will bear much fruit. Now, I'm not abiding in him as a means to some greater end, because being in Christ is the end. But he promised through that union, we would do a lot of cool things. He even said if we do the union thing with him, we'll do more than he did on earth. Crazy, he said it. So even if that's how we get to this teaching and operate it in our lives in such a degree, I'm okay with that. And let me tell you two things, and you need to hear both of these together, because otherwise you'll come at me for just one of them. Really, really important to hold these two things. First thing, every single one of us needs a rhythm of rest. You agree with me? Yep. But the second thing is, we don't all have the same prescription for what rest looks like in our lives. You with me? Let me tell you what we've done with spiritual disciplines, and I've done it too, so I apologize for whoever I've done this to with my writing, speaking, all the things, personal meetings. What we tend to do is we hear somebody, oftentimes like a person like me or someone else that teaches here at Epic, it could be Rachel, Will, Atul, many, whomever. Someone up here says, here's how I'm becoming more like Jesus, and we think that's what I have to do exactly to become like Jesus, right? If they journal, I've got to journal. If they wake up at 5, I've got to wake up at 5. If they have this group that they do. So when it comes to rest, you need a rhythm, and you need to know the prescription needed for you. Some of us have more capacity than others. Some of us are at a different life stage than others. Some of us are able to carry things heavier. Some of us need more frequent rest. Some of us need longer kinds of rest. So here's the question. Please carry this with you. Talk about it with someone close to you. Based on how God has wired you and your current season of life, what are the things that restore, renew, and replenish you? Based on how God has wired you and your current season, what are the things that restore, renew, and replenish you? Think about the activities. Think about the time of day. I think there should be some of this a little bit even every day. For me, that does look like the morning. Some of my friends, it looks like late at night. Some people I know, they don't schedule a lunch, and they pray and walk one day a week during the lunch hour. What does it look like? What does rest look like for you? Some of you, it looks like hiking. Some of you are like, that is work. Some of you, it's long baths. Some of you, it's particular parks in the city. What is it for you? Who are the people? What are the activities? Where are the places? When is the time for you to get the soul refreshment, replenishment, and rest that you need? I used to think that rest meant doing nothing, and I hate doing nothing. Anybody else? Now, we're going to divide the room. This is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. How many of you like me? It's not so much that I hate it. I just don't know how to do it. Anybody just like, I don't know. What does it mean to think about nothing and do nothing? Like, I'm like, I can't even go without thinking about nothing, if that's the right way to say it. If you're an English teacher, sorry, double negative thing is in my mind. And you're like, Ben, you could empty your mind if you just tried hot yoga. I don't want hot yoga. Room temperature yoga. That's not true today. It won't be true next time you see me. When you come back 20 years from now, it's just not part of my prescription. Don't judge me. Do not email me. Do not give me a link. Do not tell me you'll buy me sessions. There's some other things that bring me rest. You can buy those, but I love this quote from Ben Stewart, who wrote a book on rest and war, as he called it, and it's about the internal stuff and taking care of our lives. Listen to what he said. He wrote, I need an activity that engages my mind so it does not drift back to work. If you do not prioritize a redemptive release, the enemy will always be there to offer a destructive one. The whole book is good, but just that quote, if we can throw that quote back up, I know it's in a couple parts. But if you don't do a redemptive release, the enemy will always be there to offer a destructive one. Let me tell you something. If you don't have a rhythm of rest, you're still going to be exhausted, stressed, and burned out. But if you don't have a healthy, bring you close to God's spirit of rest, you will choose to go the opposite way because you will just need some kind of release. A counselor gave this acronym, and it's really helpful. This is when we make our biggest mistakes, and it's when we commit sins that become habitual and addictive. He just gave the acronym HALT. When we're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. That's when I tend to fall. Anybody else? So the question isn't, are you going to seek release? Witness? The only question is, will it be a healthy or destructive release? And I'm not the only one. This is just how human nature works. It's also how God works in us. So and listen, so many of us calendar all the things we do, and yet we forget to calendar rest. So after you answer the question, here's what that looks like in my life, put it into my calendar. Put it on your calendar. And don't feel bad about it. I have a friend who would literally put down an appointment with a fake person just so he kept that open on his calendar. Like, who is Frank so-and-so? I don't know, but they keep meeting every Thursday from 2 to 4. He's like, he doesn't even work here. I know. Do what you need to do to get what you need to get. And listen to this. This is another counterintuitive teaching that I believe. As you receive heavier assignments from God, rest will become even more crucial for your life. I've got a post on this coming out soon, but I've thought about this a lot over the last decade. There are times where I see people carrying what I would call lighter assignments, but they're being crushed by them. And then I see other people carrying really heavy assignments, but they carry them like they're light. Have you ever seen people do this? Like stuff that stressed me out and crushed me, I see a mentor and I'm like, how do you do that? And I think part of it is to have that rhythm of rest under your life. What separates, a lot of things is the answer, but as we're thinking about the topic today, what separates me from Olympic athletes or professional athletes? Tell me a lot, come on. But we're talking today about rest. Rest. They have massive training regimens, yes. But LeBron pays over $1 million for his sleep. And some of you are like, well, if I had that much money, I would pay. I would not. No, man. I'm not even going to lie to you. I'm not putting that percentage of my income on sleep. Some of you, you're going to have to forfeit more significant things God wants to hand you. Not significant in the world's eyes, significant in God's eyes, and it would be in yours. And the reason you're going to have to forfeit it because you've told yourself, if I get something more significant, I will lose time for rest. But let's think about Jesus for a second. He received the heaviest assignment known to humanity throughout history. And what did he do? He had to accomplish his mission in how many years? 3. Like just over 1,000 days, just barely over 1,000 days. Listen, so Mark gives us this one moment. Listen to what Luke tells us in 5:15 and 16. Yet the news about him spread all the more so that crowds of people came to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Counterintuitive, here's why. You believe to take on more assignment or more significant assignment, you believe that you'll have less time for rest. But listen to what Jesus did. The more demanding his mission became, the more he prayed. The more popular he became and everybody wanted him, the more he withdrew from people. If you want to keep moving forward in all that God wants to hand you to accomplish on this earth, you better be ready to have the correct rhythms of rest, renewal, restoration, and replenishment based on how it works for you. Otherwise, you're going to have to forfeit, I think, a whole lot. My rhythms have been more important the more God has put in my hands. And when I forget them, as I shared with you at the beginning, and I know a lot of you felt, me too. When I forget them, I've got to dial back what I think I'm going to do because I can't do it at that level if I don't have something undergirding that much assignment, right? So there's nothing wrong with wanting a promotion, but if you get that weightier responsibility, do you have something under you to carry you? Let me give you 2 apps in a book that have been really helpful for me. The first one is the John Eldredge Pause app. Super helpful. There's like an unlocking thing, a 30-day thing. There's emotional health, resilience. He does a lot. He does a morning and evening thing. That's really, really helpful. The Lectio 365 app, I know some of us use that. That's really helpful. They even have one for families. And then the best book I've read a lot on this subject, but the best book that I've read, and I've probably read it a dozen times over the last 20 years, is a book called The Rest of God by Mark Buchanan. Do yourself a favor, see if the library has it, buy it. I just promise you it will help you so much. And then here's the invitation from Hebrews 4. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. So I want to give you a different synonym for the word rest. I've always thought that rest meant doing nothing. I've always thought that lazy might be a close synonym to rest. Anybody else? I always thought rest was passive. But I want to give you a new synonym because I think this is the heart of today's message. Every time you hear the word rest, I want you to think of the word trust. Every time we hear the word rest, let's think of the word trust. Why, Ben? Well, you don't get into the kingdom of God unless you rest in the finished work of Jesus. You don't grow in your trust of Jesus unless you rest in what he is able to do when you can't do what he's able to do. And I care so much about the work God's called me to do. I care so much about the work God's called you to do. And here at Epic, I care deeply, collectively, about the work that he's called us to do here. And because I care about that, and I want you to care about that, let's make sure we care enough about rest. It's not lost on me that even our announcement time today, we're announcing a third service that's going to create more work. Some of you are like, no, man, I'm still just going to come to one service, not serve on a team. It's not going to create any more work for me. It's going to create more work, and we're also at the same time talking about a church-wide retreat. I love that. You don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. God's got something significant for us to go after, but will we have the rhythms and disciplines that work for us to sustain the life he's called us to live? I want to ask you just to take a posture of prayer. I'm going to ask our worship leaders and band to come back up, and I'm going to talk about a few categories, and when I say the category that fits right where you're at today, I just want to ask you to stand. I'm going to pray for you. Lots of different kinds of rest we need. The first category I want to pray for is for everyone in this room. If you would just say, hey, right now, what I need is physical rest. Would you stand? Physical rest. You're physically exhausted. You're struggling maybe with insomnia. Maybe you're a new parent. Maybe there's so much on your mind. Maybe you haven't taken care of your body. Whatever the case is, we just want to pray for your physical rest. And so under the sound of my voice, Holy Spirit, we are praying for every person standing that you would give them the best night of sleep they've had tonight in a long time. We're praying that would you set the conditions in their home that they might be free to take a nap this afternoon. As you give them this gift, would you also give them a new way to carry their lives? God, everything we're reading today says that you created our bodies to need sleep. Would you give that gift to these people in Jesus' name? You may be seated. If you would be in the room and you would say, you know what, I'm not sure, or maybe you did say physical rest or not, but you need soul rest. You need the anxiety to be reduced. You need the fear to be quieted down. You need your sense of well-being to be made whole. Would you stand and just say, hey, would you pray for me to get that soul rest, that communion with God rest? Would you stand? Yeah. Yeah, under the Spirit and the Word, he says to you, come to me, all you who are weary. Come and get rest. Don't be the Isaiah response. Don't be, hey, he's offering it to you and you snubbed him. You snubbed the offer. Receive. Even now, Holy Spirit, would you meet people in the depths of their soul? Not that every conversation will be had in this moment, but would you begin the conversation? And so again, if you're standing, I think these are just the words the Spirit wants to offer you today. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. Enter that Sabbath rest. You may be seated. The next group, I want you to stand if you know you need to change some of your beliefs when it comes to what you believe about rest, about God, and or about yourself, about what you have to hold up, about what you're able to hold up. But if you want to just say, hey, I need to have some different beliefs about what rest means and who God is and who I am, would you stand up and I would just pray that fresh faith into you? So the truth for you is that you're not superhuman, you're not God, and you don't have to be. God, would you guide us along the path of truth about yourself, about ourselves, about rest, so that when we rest, we're declaring what we believe about you in truth and what we believe about ourselves in truth. You may be seated. How many of you would stand and say, I just feel like I have this massive pressure to be the main provider in my life, and I need to be freed from that? Would you stand? And it's not that you and I don't have provision roles for our lives and our families. We do. That's fact. Oh, but that word main, I think, is the adjective I'm leaning towards. Ben, you are a provider to some degree, but you're not the main. When it comes to our church, I know I have a role to play, and so many of you do, as we all give and strategize and all the things, but guys, we're not the main provider even for our church. God, would you show us that you are the main provider of our lives? Would you meet us with the reminder, like Will told us today, to remember that the God who gave us everything, he's still going to be mainly providing for our future. God, that's true for our church building we want to move into. It's true for adding people to the teams to go to 3 gatherings. God, it's true for the person that doesn't know how they're going to afford October's rent. God, would you come and show us, and would you do the heavy lifting for us? I want to ask everyone to stand as we respond. If you're a ministry and prayer leader, would you just come on the front? Guys, this altar is open. I know in my own heart, it's just, I need to tell God what I did even in the last gathering. Like, God, you are it, and I need you. And we'd love to pray rest into you. You can pray about all these things at the altar, but let's respond as we declare that God is the one that we need most.